Okay, Ben. Here we're going to be looking at topic 25. So again, one of the last topics. Uh, specifically, it is called the transformation of Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. Transformation of Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. So the 16 and 1700s. Okay, so some big themes here are religious conflict, the Protestant Reformation, for example, the building of powerful states, capitalism, and early modern science, which would definitely influence Western Europe. So, states, capitalism, and early modern science. So early capitalism encouraged European merchants and manufacturers to recognize their businesses. To reorganize their businesses in search of maximum efficiency. So, and early modern science challenged traditional ways of understanding the world and the universe and prompted European intellectuals to seek an entirely rational, so non-religious, a rational understanding of human society as well as the natural world. So between 15 and 1800, we're having a focus on between 16 and 1600 and 1700, but sorry, focus on the 1600s and 1700s. But yeah, in this sort of period, Western Europe underwent massive transformation that actually were quite unsettling, but did help to strengthen European society. And of course, by 1800, European states had become especially powerful, wealthy, and dynamic. Okay, so although the people of Western Europe spoke different languages and had different customs, the Church of Rome provided them with a common religious and cultural heritage. So during the 16th and 17th centuries, revolts against the Roman Catholic Church shattered the religious unity of Western Europe. So this was in the form of Protestant reformers who established a series of churches independent of Rome, and the Roman Catholic leaders strengthened their own church against the challenges. So throughout the early modern times, yeah, there were these religious controversies. So we call this the fragmentation of Western Christendom. So the Protestant Reformation the Protestant Reformation was, I guess, the most important guy in forming this was a guy called Martin Luther, who lived between 1483 and 1546. Now, he attracted enthusiastic support from people who resented the policies of the Roman Church. So this was the backbone of the Protestant Reformation, the resentment of the policies of the Roman Church. He was a really talented writer. He benefited from the printing press, which had been invented in halfway through the 1400s. So with the printing press, there was a lot of reading material, and a very large literate community developed in Europe. So his supporters, for example, took their own, printed their own materials, and religious controversies kept the press busy by churning out all these works. Luther, he pretty much attacked the Roman Church for a wide range of abuses and called for the reform of Christendom. Okay. So called for the reform of Christianity. And he also rejected the Christian hierarchy and proclaimed that the Bible was the only source of Christian authority, and that it shouldn't rest in the Pope and such. So in response to the Protestant Reformation, the Roman Catholic authorities undertook a wide-ranging reform effort of their own, known as the Catholic Reformation. So the purpose of this was to clarify differences between Roman and Protestant churches and persuade the Protestants to return to the Roman Church and to deepen the sense of spirituality and religious commitment to their own community. To persuade Protestants to return to the Roman Church. Oops. So, Europeans took religion particularly seriously in the 16th century, and religious divisions, these divisions that developed through the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Reformation that caused division, helped fuel social and political conflict. So, apart from the wars, which of course were the most devastating violence, there was also the hunt for witches. Now, this was a huge part of 16th century Europe. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was especially prominent in regions such as the Rhineland in modern day Germany, where tensions between Protestants and Roman Catholics ran high. So in areas where the Protestant Reformation um, was was quite prominent, there was a lot of witch hunting going on. So Europeans long believed that certain individuals possessed unusual or supernatural powers. Um, Theologians developed a theory that some of these were witches who derived their powers, such as the ability to fly through the night on brooms and pitchforks and yada yada. So, yeah, in the 16th and 17th centuries, fears that individuals were making alliances with the devil sparked a widespread hunt for witches, and about 110,000 people underwent trial as suspected witches, and about 60,000 of them died, either by hanging or burning at the stake. Most of the victims were poor, old, single, or widowed women who lived on the margins of the societies and were easy targets for the accusers. So the religious tensions that were occurring between the Romans and the Catholics led to outright war in these communities. Religious wars, they racked France for like 36 years, for example, between the they racked France between 1562 and 1598, and they also complicated relations between Protestant and Catholic states. So religious convictions also aggravated relationships between the Netherlands and Spain by fueling the revolt of the Dutch provinces from the overlord, the King of Spain. But the point that I'm sort of leading to that I want you to remember is the religious wars, they culminated in a great continental conflict known as the 30 Years' War. Between 1618 and 1648. So this war opened after the Holy Roman Emperor attempted to force his Bohemian subjects to return to the Roman Catholic Church. And the main battleground was the Emperor's territory in Germany. So it happened mainly in Germany. And by the time the war ended, however, the Spanish and the French and the Dutch and the German and the Swedish and the Danish and the Bohemian and the Russian forces had all taken part in the conflict. So it was a continental big conflict. So the war itself was the most destructive European conflict before the 20th century. Okay, so quite apart from the violence and the brutalities committed by the undisciplined soldiers, the war also damaged economies and societies throughout Europe and led to the deaths about one third of the German population. So 1 in 3 of the German states. Remember, Germany wasn't unified at this point. 1 in 3 people in Germany died. And though the religious differences were not the only issues for the war, they complicated the other issues and made them more difficult to resolve. Okay, so the 30 Years' War led to something that, let's just say, is very important for you to know for the exam, called the... Just plugging something in. Called the Peace of Westphalia. Now, the Peace of Westphalia was a series of peace treaties signed between May and October 1648 in the Westphalian cities of Münster and Osnabrück. So, series of peace treaties signed in Westphalian cities. Now, Westphalia, is just a region in northwest modern Germany. So this treaty, Ben, was particularly important because, these treaties, multiple of them, they ended the 30 Years' War, okay? Which, if you remember, was between 1618 and 1648. So it ended this war in the Holy Roman Empire, and the 8 Years' War between Spain and the Dutch Republic, which was between 1568 and 1648, with Spain formally recognizing the independence of the Dutch Republic. So it ended the 30 Years' War in the Holy Roman Empire, and it ended the 8 Years' War between Spain and the Dutch Republic. So, in the absence of an imperial authority capable of imposing and maintaining order in Europe, sovereign states had to find ways to resolve conflicts themselves. And I guess this was a big catalyst for the peace treaties of Westphalia. So the 30 Years' War demonstrated the chaos and devastation that conflict could bring. As I said, it was an extremely devastating war in which 1/3 of the population of the German states were killed. So in an effort to avoid tearing the society apart, European states ended the 30 Years' War with the Peace of Westphalia. As I said, these treaties were signed in 1648. And these treaties, they lay the foundations for a system of independent competing states. Okay? Independent competing states. And by the treaty's terms, the European states regarded one another as sovereign and equal. So there wasn't an imperialist authority looming over Europe. All states were sovereign and equal. They also mutually recognized their rights to organize their own domestic and religious affairs and agreed that political and diplomatic affairs were to be conducted by states according to their own interests. So, European religious unity essentially disappeared with the signing of these treaties, and the era of the sovereign state had arrived. So the Peace of Westphalia didn't bring an end to war, of course. I mean, we know that. There were wars that occurred after 1648 in Europe. War was almost, constant in early modern Europe, but most conflicts thereafter were minor affairs, okay? That's the difference. But some did grow to sizable proportions. So here is Europe after the Peace of Westphalia, and we see both the big changes are England and Netherlands. The Netherlands, which is here, both become states run by constitutions, not absolute monarchies. So, in regards to the treaties of Westphalia, I wrote this. So they didn't restore peace throughout Europe, but they did create a basis for national self-determination and did decrease the magnitude of the wars, I guess. Established the Peace of Westphalia established the precedent of peaces established by a diplomatic congress, a new system of political order in Central Europe, later called Westphalian sovereignty, based upon the concept of coexisting sovereign states, balance of power. That is, there wasn't like one overarching imperial power subjugating the other ones. Interstate aggression was to be held in check by the balance of power, yep. A norm was established against interference in another state's domestic affairs. And as European influence spread across the globe, the Westphalian principles, especially the concept of sovereign states, became central to international law and the prevailing world order.